Okay, wait. Is it on? There we go. All right. Well, first, thank you for being here, all my family members, all my beautiful cousins and auntie and brother, sister. Wait, no brother. Clay's here though. Douglas Allen Azar was my father. I told myself that it's necessary to be strong in the face of death. This is because death is intrinsic to life. I was aiming to be the person at my father's funeral and services that everyone could lean on during their grief and misery. They could rely on me. Strength in the face of adversity is a worthy and noble ambition. As this day rapidly approached, it became clear that I would be leaning on my family and friends. They'd be the ones providing me with strength. So thank you to all of you for your support. I'd like to have my sister, Alex Azar, come up here and talk. She's been my rock during this spiritual and emotional time. And I'd like her to come up here and say a few words about our Father. Come on up, Alex.
Hi, my family and everyone online. I'm Alex, Doug's oldest daughter, and I just firstly wanted to start by thanking you all for the love and support and just for being here today to celebrate my dad's life. On March 13th, the world lost an outstandingly smart man, a beloved friend, and a defender of nerds. Everyone that knew him knew what an amazing person he was, and I always admired the friendships he had because they were so authentic and genuine. Not only that, but his family was everything to him. He dreamt of the perfect family life, and although it may have been different than he expected, we really did have that. When my dad loved you, you knew he was going to love you with his whole heart and to the best of his ability. I have so many stories that I could share with him, that I could share with you, but 3 stuck out to me significantly while I was writing this speech. The first one is about his storytelling ability. Growing up, I would go on long drives with him, and as a kid, that sounds boring, right? Wrong. I always looked forward to those drives because I knew my dad had some amazing stories to tell me. I remember once we were admiring a mountain in the distance and how the sun hit the high points of the trees perfectly. Immediately, my dad began telling me this intricate fairy tale about a young girl and her adventure into the forest through a door that led her to a magical land filled with trolls, bridges, and treasures. My only regret in that moment is that I didn't record him because those stories would have been bestsellers. His mind was so creative and so strong, and that never left him once his entire life. People might think that because of the tragedies he'd experienced as a child, that his mind might be the first thing to go. But I think my dad turned that around and used it as his superpower. The next story is of a recent time I had with him. He had just been through so much trial and sickness and had just had a couple of good months when he started to notice he was having a hard time eating again, and he felt like his kidneys had shifted and were possibly expanding. They were causing him a lot of pain, and it was one of the first times he ever expressed that pain to me. We began talking about God as our Father and how much he loves us and wants us to experience his blessings. I told him to think of how he felt about his kids. What would he do for them in order for them to have a good life and be happy and healthy? My dad told me that he would do anything for us, that he would give his life for us. And that's when I told him to think about our Father in heaven. Hasn't he done the same for us as his children? At that moment, tears began flowing down my dad's cheeks, and he expressed to me how much that meant to him. He asked if I could possibly pray for him to feel the Father's love. Immediately, I had a vision in my mind about the exact way I wanted him to sit and the exact words I wanted to say. I told him that and then prayed for him. Moments later, he laughed and told me that he felt his kidneys shift over to the right and they weren't causing him pain anymore. He jumped up and said, "Okay, now I want to pray for you." He then proceeded to tell me that when I said I had a vision in my mind of the way I was going to pray for him, that he did too in that exact moment. He held my face in his hands and prayed over me like I had never heard him pray before. And it was a moment I'll never forget and will always cherish. That was my dad. He always thought of others no matter the experiences he was having. The last and final story I want to share is one about his rose garden. His house on Lexington had rose bushes enclosing the front yard, and I remember as a kid, him and I would always go out and water them. I asked him why he loved those roses so much, and he told me that his mom loved to garden and her favorite flowers were roses. He said that those rose bushes were for her. Every once in a while, he'd cut some down for me and give them to me. He always included some of the yellow roses, which were sparse in the garden. And he told me it was because they were his favorite. Now fast forward to March 13th of this year. It was a couple hours after he had passed, and my husband and I were walking along the beach in Oregon, processing what had just happened. A few miles down the beach with no one around was a single yellow rose, propped straight up in the sand. That memory at the Lexington house immediately came back to me, and I realized there that that was him telling me he had made it to heaven and was surrounded by his favorite yellow roses and requested that one be sent down to me. On our walk back, the rose had disappeared, but luckily I had a picture of it on my phone that I will cherish forever. My dad was so strong throughout these last 3 years that he had been diagnosed with cancer, as well as through every other trial he's faced. He would always tell his kids that he wanted to be an example for us if we were ever sick. If we were ever sick or going through a trial in life, and he sure was a great one. But he told us at the end that it was time for him to go see his dad, who passed when he was 14. I have so much peace in my heart, knowing that my dad is so happy, and also that he was so ready to experience the bliss of heaven with Jesus and his parents that he's missed for so long. Again, I just want to thank you all so much for being here and for celebrating this amazing person my dad was. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. That was beautiful. Such strong, smart women in this family. Like I said, I wanted to be the strong older brother and stuff, but I was just crying like a baby at the service today and looking at Alex and Lila, and they were just so strong, giving me strength. It's incredible. Another strong, smart woman I'd like to come say a few words is my cousin Patty.
So I'm Doug's oldest niece. I'm gonna do my best to get through this. Love you guys. There's a verse that suggests the grace and character that reminded me of my Uncle Doug. And it's Romans 5:1-5. Therefore, since we've been justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. Through him, we have also obtained access by faith into this grace in which we stand, and we rejoice in the hope and the glory of God. More than that, we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that sufferings produce endurance, and endurance produces character. And character produces hope, and hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who's been given to us. Thinking about my Uncle Doug instantly brings to mind that booming laugh and his effervescent personality. He was able to relegate stories from his childhood that made me wish I knew more than he shared. He would discuss his great affection for his sisters, Polly and Dee, and his brother. He would share his reverence for his father. He could both talk about what a great, intelligent man his father was, and in the next breath discuss how he would create his own rules of the road while driving. Doug would hilariously laugh, explaining how anyone in his dad's way while he was driving could end up as roadkill. One of my earliest memories of my uncle was when he came up to Denver to celebrate one of my birthdays. I'm not entirely sure why this memory struck me. I just know that it really touched me that he came all the way up just for one of my birthdays. And I looked up to him greatly because he was so smart, witty, and fun. I instantly decided and held to the idea growing up that I wanted to be just like him and wanted to follow his footsteps. Over the years, I would seek him out when I desperately needed his wisdom and advice. And the day-to-day, being so caught up in my own life, as we normally do in our youth, I wouldn't consider what he was going through in his own life. But it would never matter to him. He was always selflessly offering his guidance, love, and advice. In those times, I would reach out for some perceived crisis, a financial accounting exam that I failed, or a job interview that I didn't think went well, or when I was pregnant, a scan that showed my daughter had an abnormality due to the size of her head. In every instance, Uncle Doug would just offer that laugh that would put anyone at ease, then offer his advice. Don't worry about that test, you'll do well in that class, you've got Azar blood. Don't worry, you got that job. And your baby's girl is fine. I had a big head just like that when I was little. The funniest time was when my husband and I were worried that our baby wouldn't take a bottle when I had to go back to work from maternity leave. We called Uncle Doug in a panic, and he just laughed hysterically at us while giving his advice. And wouldn't you know it, in every instance that he gave me his advice, he wound up being right. More than any of these stated qualities, the qualities that I looked up to the most were the ones that are the most substantial in life. One of these qualities was his faith. Doug had a deep, unquestionable faith in God. Despite everything, he prevailed in every obstacle he had in life. He loved the Lord with all his heart. It was something he shared after the passing of Aunt Polly. His faith was unwavering. The other quality that I greatly admired was his love for his family, especially his children. Each of them were the light of his life. He would take such great pride and devotion in his kids. He was so proud of Ryan, first. Woo! As the feisty character he was a little guy, just boundless energy and personality, and then his great admiration in the man his son has become. He came to our house when Ryan's mom was expecting him, and he just beamed with the excitement of becoming a father. And Alex, so quiet and studious as a young girl, Uncle would talk about how hard she would study in school and talk about his daughter and dad time watching TV shows together. He would later talk about what a sweet and kind young woman she has grown into, and he would always say that you were just an angel. And in Lila, when I came to visit when she was young, he would talk and laugh about what a quiet and shy little girl she was. She actually hid underneath the table to avoid us. He became so proud of the strong and determined young lady she is today. This doesn't begin to sum up what a wonderful man my uncle was. He carried a strong presence in his family. He was special, one of a kind, and we'll all deeply miss him until the day we are reunited in heaven. Thank you.
I can attest to that part about liking Ryan so much. I know that part's true for sure. Next, we're gonna have my cousin Michelle come up and say a few words. And she's also gonna say a few words for my aunt Gail, because Aunt Gail's too cool to come up here.
Hi, my family and everybody online. My name is Michelle, and I am Uncle's second niece, Patty's younger sister. And I have so many great memories of Uncle Doug. He was such a wonderful man. I will always remember his great loud laugh and how he was, when his eyes closed really tight when he laughed. Our Aunt Polly did that too, our sweet Aunt Polly. Uncle Doug was such a great speaker and was the most intelligent man I ever met. I always compared anybody I would meet or talk to that was really smart and intelligent. And I would be like, they are smart, but not quite as smart as Uncle Doug. And he was also so sweet and had a big heart. He was such a wonderful uncle and was always checking in on all of us. He was always so helpful and always giving us advice, and we did always turn to him and ask his advice. I will miss how he called me dear whenever I talked to him on the phone. Uncle Doug loved his children more than anything. He was so very proud of all of them and the wonderful people they have become. He passed along his intelligence, great sense of humor, spirituality, and kindness to all of them. He would do anything for his family. Uncle Doug was so strong and brave throughout all of the challenges and illnesses he faced. He always faced everything with a positive attitude and a great sense of humor. On the day of his kidney transplant years ago, my mom and I went to see him in the hospital. He had such a new lease on life. Always athletic, he said he wanted to compete in the Special Olympics and would give Gary Coleman a run for his money. He had everyone in the room laughing. He had such a great sense of humor and made everyone in the room laugh and smile. I will love and miss you, Uncle Doug, until we meet again. And then I have some words to say and memories to share from my mom, Gail, Doug's older sister. Our mother, Gail, asked me to share some of these words about Doug from her. She loved her baby brother so much. Growing up, they were two peas in a pod. She often took care of him. She was so proud of him and his intelligence and accomplishments. Mom was always calling Uncle Doug for advice. She just loved chatting with him about their days and the kids also. Mom and Uncle Doug had many of the same habits and liked a lot of the same things. They were very, very close. Mom had some funny memories of Uncle Doug when he was a young boy. When he was about 2 years old, he would try to call her Sweetie, and it came out as Dee Dee. And he couldn't pronounce Sweetie. And that became Mom's nickname for years. Aunt Polly called her Dee Dee, and as soon as her and my dad started dating, she told him the story, and he called her Dee Dee throughout their whole entire relationship. And when Doug was about 4 years old, Mom was making a chocolate cake with a stand mixer. Her and Doug both loved sweets a lot. Mom started the mixer and left the room. She heard a shriek, and Uncle Doug had climbed up on a chair and licked the mixer while it was spinning, and his tongue got stuck. Mom could not get him loose from the mixer, so she had to call their older brother, Richard, and he came down to the house with tools and a saw and had to cut apart the mixer to set Doug free. When Doug was about 7, Mom had done his laundry and went into his room late at night to put it on his dresser. She turned on the light, And he stood up and went over to the window and was cranking the window open and closed, open and closed. When Mom asked him what he was doing, he said he was trying to turn off the light. Mom laughed so hard and he did not remember it the next day and might have sleepwalked. Mom has so many wonderful memories of Doug throughout their life together, despite all their hardships, and she will miss him terribly, but will look forward to the day that she reunites with him, Polly, and all of their loved ones in heaven.
Thanks, cuz. What are you doing with the microphone? It's going nuts now.
I think I broke it.
Next, my dad's favorite cousin, Harry Goodnight. We have him joining via Zoom, and so we were gonna see if he could say a few words. So give me a second to prep that.
What you can just share this actually.
Okay, Harry, I think we got you.
Okay. Everybody hear me okay?
We can.
So I'm Harry Goodnight, and I'm Doug's first cousin. Doug's mother, Pat, and my mother, Rita, were very, very close and loving sisters. One doesn't get to choose their cousins, but given the opportunity again, I would always choose Doug for mine. Doug was many things to many people. He was a man with prodigious talent and intelligence. But most of all, Doug's first allegiance was to his family. Family meant everything to him. Doug's appreciation for family may have been tempered by his early loss of his mother, Pat, around the age of 5, and then losing his father when Doug was in high school in 1969. I got close to Doug when we were teenagers, around the age of Lila now. My family used to go to Raton and visit and have Doug's father, Richard, work on our taxes for our family. I loved our time together in Raton. And then when Doug's father, Richard, died, Doug and his siblings, Polly and Gail, came up to Denver and stayed with us at our house for about a month during the summer of 1969. During that summer, Doug and I bonded like brothers. From that time forward, even if we didn't see each other for years at a time, whenever we saw or spoke with each other, we always resumed our relationship as if no time had passed. I first met Doug's children when my wife Melissa and I went through Albuquerque when we were moving back to California in 2001. Doug graciously accepted us into his home. This is when I first met Ryan and Alex. I could see Doug's deep love for them. Throughout the years, we kept in touch by phone, and Doug came to visit us at our home in near Pismo Beach in 2015. Doug extended his love for me to my wife, Melissa, and I was grateful to see her included as family in Doug's life and eyes. At Christmas in 2018, Doug was able to come to visit my wife, Melissa, and me in Solvang it's a quaint little Danish town near Santa Barbara. With Doug were his children, Alex, Ryan, Lila, and together with Emily, Ryan's wife, and Adam, Doug's nephew. I've sent some pictures on for everyone to see, but this is all of us in Solvang during that day. I don't know if you can see it or not. So anyway, you'll be able to see those pictures that I've sent on via email.
There it is. Yeah, there it is. Okay.
So we had a lovely time together, and everyone was all so happy. We were so glad that we could have that experience this close to the end of Doug's life. Doug was so proud of all of you. He beamed, telling me about each of your accomplishments and how your lives were turning out to be so positive. Doug's father, Richard, was his lifelong role model, and Doug emulated many of his achievements, but most of all, Doug honored Richard's love of family. I believe that love of family is what Doug would most like to be remembered for. Melissa and I are honored to be included to speak today, and especially as Doug would wish it, we hope to continue our relationship with Ryan, Emily, Alexandra, Lila, Alan, Adam, Gail, and all her children, Patty and Michelle. As you grow and prosper with your families, you are always welcome in our house. We visit Oregon often, so please come and visit us there too. And we love you all.
Thanks, Harry. Okay, let's see. Is Harry muted? Can you tell? Yeah, okay, great. Okay, let's see if this works any better. Okay, great. It's still all messed up. What the heck did you do?
Well, that was great, Harry. Thanks so much. So my father, Douglas Allen Azar, was a giant of a man, both physically and intellectually. One of his close friends, Brady Lovelady, told me, "Your father is a god among insects." I thought that was a great quote, so I went and looked it up, and it's from the 2003 X-Men movie, X2, X-Men United, and it's a quote from Magneto. And immediately this made me think of kind of like a prophetic conversation I had with my dad that demonstrated his brilliance. So one day I asked my father, "Dad, how come they call him Magneto when he's a supervillain whose powers revolve exclusively around magnetism? It should be Magneto, not Magneto." And I thought I was so smart. I bet you Dad never thought of that, you know. And Dad calmly replied, "Well, son, there was a scarcely recognizable version of Magneto that appeared in the 1960s Spider-Man animated series. And in that series, they called him Magneto. But eventually, a more authentic interpretation appeared in the 1978 Fantastic Four cartoon. And that's where they flipped the name to Magneto. And already, I'm like, okay, you know a lot about this. I was just joking." And as if that wasn't enough, he elaborated. He goes, "Oh, and by the way, the Magneto version actually came from Paul McCartney. After the Beatles, he had his new band Wings, and he came out with this song, Magneto and the Titanium Man. And that was in 1975, 3 years before the Fantastic Four cartoon." Okay, dude. But needless to say, that was more information than I bargained for, but it was just a glimpse of his brilliance in every topic. Aside from being an intellectual giant, he taught me what it means to be a man, what it means to be a good person. As Harry said, my father deeply cared about his family, and he taught me family comes first. Together we are strong and resolute. Family will always be there. You will be cared for by your mother, brothers, sisters, sons, daughters, aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, and of course your father. He would say, "I pray you live honestly and humbly." And he would stress, "Be home for dinner." That's great advice for any young man. Make sure to be home for dinner. It is family who will be at your side even when you make 1,000 mistakes. My sweet Aunt Polly used to tell me, "You can make 1,000 mistakes at your young age and none of it matters." I assume she meant none of it matters to me because I'm family. My father also showed me how to protect family. As I mentioned before, he was a giant, intellectually, but also physically. He had catcher's mitts for hands, Cadillac Eldorados for his feet, and he also had a long history of fighting, but fighting for those in need. This is because he was a jock physically, but in his heart, he was a nerd. One time, my brother Jake and I were walking home, and we're like 10 or 11, and we see this guy, a neighbor, yelling and threatening his wife. And we're like, "What the heck, okay, that's crazy." And he sees us, see him yelling at his wife. And then, so he starts coming towards us, and Jake is extremely talented and really fast, and all the Azars aren't fast. So Jake takes off running and he gets away, and the guy corners me, and I'm super slow, right? So I'm like, hey, dude, you know. And so I talk my way out of it, and the guy's gonna let me go, and I take off running home, and the guy has a change of heart and starts running after me. And by the time I got home, Jake had gotten my father outside. And he was waiting in the front yard in the perfect fighting attire, a bathrobe and house slippers. And the legend goes they were bunny slippers. I don't know if that's true, but I'm pretty sure that I remember bunny slippers. And so my dad confronted the man, and the man, who was not small, made a move on my dad, and my father immediately destroyed him. He swung punches that could chop down a redwood, and the man yelled, "I got a gun." At which point my father kicked him in the face with the bunny slippers, and it knocked the guy out. But the point of the story is that my father was a gentle giant, a bunny slipper wearing giant. He was always gentle unless provoked, and few things provoked him. But you could bet there would be a problem if anyone crossed his friends, family, or loved ones. He was fiercely loyal to his people. And you could not ask for a better ally in battle. My father also introduced me to faith, religion, to purpose, and finding meaning in life. He taught me to say my prayers every night, but he also taught me not to take life too seriously. Every night before I would say my prayers, he would either tell me a story that he made up off the top of his head, or he would read me a story like Jack and the Beanstalk. One night I was deliriously tired, and my dad told me to say my prayers, and I began to say the Our Father. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread. And Dad and I would always laugh about that. He goes, okay, sweetheart, go to bed. God understands what you're trying to do here. As I said earlier, he would also make up stories to tell me before bed. These stories were fantastic stories built on a wealth of knowledge about life and science fiction and religion and comic books. Every story seemed to be a fairy tale passed on from generation to generation. However, eventually, I began to notice a pattern in his stories. You could say the hallmarks of a good made-up bedtime story. He would have something about an old man, a piece of jewelry or a watch, and a mirror or a door. In all of his stories, he would begin to tell me every time. It was an old man who found a necklace, and I'm like, wait a second, dude, these sound the same. And so I asked him about the components to a good bedtime story, and he laughed so hard with this great big booming laugh. He had been caught. That said, he was a wonderful storyteller, and I could only think of how he would tell our adventures today. But back to his intellect and wisdom. He taught me not only how to live, but how to die. As I said in the obituary, he did not fear death. He controlled how he would deal with his fate. I believe he was prepared and ready for any suffering the world threw his way. And I believe he was ready because of his faith. He and I had many long talks about God, about whether there was proof for God's existence, really deep talks of Aristotelian proof or cosmological proof of God. How one, there are contingent beings that exist and they depend on something else. Two, nothing comes from nothing. Change does not just happen, it must be caused by something else. Three, thus these contingent beings must have had a cause because they cannot come from nothing. Four, nothing can cause its own existence. Five, there can't be an infinite series of contingent beings or causes. That'd be ridiculous. For example, if all of us in this room were holding hands and floating 2 feet off the ground, And he went and asked each person how they were doing it, and they said the person next to them was holding them up. But everyone's floating. It doesn't make any sense. And 6, thus there must be a necessary being that caused all the contingent beings, an unmoved mover. This all would call God. So Dad would have these talks like that, and every time he'd teach me something new that I'd never thought of. We'd also talk about the arguments against God's existence, the argument of evils. If there is a perfect God, he must be all good. If he's all good, he wouldn't want evil in the world. He would have the power to rid the world of evil. Thus, there is no God, because there is evil. My father would reply, yes, but if there were only good, we would have no free will. In order for us to have a choice, there must be moral evils. So your argument of evils against God doesn't add up. I'd say, yeah, sure, but then there's natural evils, sickness, cancer, death. You know, that has nothing to do with free will. And he'd respond, well, that would only prove there is no God if there's no conceivable reason for the natural evils. And we cannot begin to comprehend the reasons God has chosen. Also, all those things are why life is so beautiful, because we are mortal, because things end. That makes everything that much more precious. These are the kinds of talks we would have together, and every time we did, I learned more and more. I know nothing at all. This guy is an intellectual giant. My father also showed me how to be a good attorney. He helped me develop my love for the law and the Constitution, but he also stressed, do not become a lawyer just because I'm one. This is great advice for any child. He became a CPA because his father was a CPA. And I don't know if he hated it, but it wasn't his passion. Luckily for me, I do love the law. He would show me tips and tricks and help me learn and comprehend and fully understand the law. He would also say how I understood the law and got better grades than him. But like I said in the obituary, brains like muscles may be purchased through time and dedication, but what is not for sale is character. His character was unwavering, just a good person to his core. Normally, when someone passes, we talk about how good of a person they were. But when I talk to all of my father's friends, they all just are so happy to have known my dad. We always discuss how lucky we were to have met him and had him in our lives. Talking about him being a good person's a given. It's a waste of time, but these few words today, I had to say something, but none of it even come close to capturing how great he truly was. In preparing for this speech, I found the note cards my father used at Polly's funeral. I write out my entire speech here, and I'm reading it word for word. You could tell I'm making horrible eye contact. My father, who gave a brilliant speech at Polly's funeral, would have 1 or 2 words on each card. One card read, never wanted to be alone. This was so true about Polly. She never wanted to be alone. We would joke about how Polly, after passing, is calling him. She's up in heaven bugging St. Peter at the pearly gates, saying, did you call for him? And St. Peter going, I called for him like 10 times. I don't know what's going on here. Did you do the stomach cancer? Did the stomach cancer? It's not working. We would also joke about the sad things in life or pain. This is probably our way of getting through it. But for example, Dad needed a kidney transplant, and because he was such a big guy, they just added in a new kidney and kept the old ones. So he had 3 kidneys. Because of his stomach cancer, they had to remove his stomach. Because of his heart attack, they had to place a stent in there. They took out part of his colon, and he had a filter placed in his neck because of the strokes due to blood clots. So anyways, we would joke about aliens abducting him and doing some sort of autopsy, right? And they go, okay, wait a second, he has 3 kidneys, no stomach, a short colon, several filters. My God, he's one of us. Another card that the note card that he had from Polly's funeral was, it read, "Story about Dad dying." And the story he told that day was that his father had a dream the night before he passed. And it was about coming out of a forest, and there was a fog, and he saw a river. And on the other side of the river, he saw his mother, and she said, "Not now, but soon." And then the next day he passed. For my father, I'm going to update the story using his guidelines for storytelling. My father awoke fully dressed in his finest clothes. He reached into his pocket and found an old pocket watch. Gotta have that watch. The time read now. He realized that moment, at that time, it was always now. The time to live life in a way that appreciates the present. Love the miracles of life, no matter how small, no matter how much suffering life entails. Beauty may still be found in every instance. He stood up, and there was an old door. Gotta have the door. Or a mirror, whatever you want. And the door eerily looked similar to one of his doors at his childhood home in Raton. He opened the door, and past the threshold, he saw Polly. And for the sake of meeting the guidelines, there's an old man as well. There's got to be an old man. I guess that could be Richard. And he looked at Polly, and she was so excited with that smile she gets, tears in her eyes, and he stepped through that threshold, reunited with her brother, her protector. Polly is so happy now. He taught us how to live and how to die. We will all remember him as the legend he was. We know that you control how you deal with adversity. He's shown us that. He taught us how to tell a great bedtime story with an old man, a piece of jewelry, a watch, a mirror, a door. And most of all, he taught us to remember that family's first. We will miss him dearly, and I can't thank you all enough for being here, and everyone online for being here. We love you all so much. So thank you.
Okay.
Good job, buddy.